G'day humans, welcome to the safe space for dangerous ideas. It is time today for the Friday panel, where two of Australia's most captivating minds gently hand-pluck a bespoke selection of the week's most scintillating stories. Like a pair of exotic birds, gently regurgitate those stories into your and my grateful ear holes. With us today, Jessie Stephens and Sarah Wilson. Hello, Jessie. Hello, Sarah. Thanks
Hi.
for being here. It's the first time we're trying this. Do you like the set? If you're not watching this on YouTube, you should go and check it out on YouTube because there's a very pretty set. And a couple of very pretty ladies, might I add.
That's a good way to get started.
Isn't that nice? A couple of broads.
Yeah, and I think
couple
we got
of
sexy
sexy
birds, didn't we?
Yes.
Couple of
exactly
sexy.
right.
No, the birds is
Yeah.
that's just, I always
know,
say that,
I
even if
know.
it's a guy.
If this is on YouTube, it's like Sarah and Jessie call out sexism in capital letters, and then you're looking angry.
Expression?
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It's gonna
That'll
be
work
everywhere.
well for the audio podcast. The shock expression.
They will.
First story, a judge in Delaware has voided Elon Musk's payout. He was supposed to get $55 billion as the boss of Tesla. US, yes, thank you for adding that. Not talking in Italian. Lira. So the shareholders, but this goes quite a long way back, right? This is not like he's just given this to himself. He put this in years ago, saying that if Tesla's performance exceeds XYZ metrics, or XYZ for our American listeners, I'm always inclusive, then he's going to get so much compensation. So the wild compensation is a result of the wild overperformance of Tesla. Is it fair for that to be clawed back from him because it's now what the judge calls an excessive amount?
Well, I mean, the background to that is that I think shareholders have kicked up a stink and have flagged that the board of directors, who I think have got a bit of a reputation for being yes men, predominantly yes men.
Right. Yes birds as well.
Yes birds, I think maybe
probably a couple of yes birds
one or
in
two,
there.
yeah. I think they're claiming that the process was not a proper process, and in fact, Elon just kind of dumped it on them, and it was beholden upon them to pass it through. Such is Elon's general way of doing things.
Right, but if you're like the creator of everything, don't you get to do that?
Is he though? I mean, this is the story he puts out there. There's always that counter argument as well that I think a lot of commentators are speaking to now, as we're all starting to go, is Elon that great? Is that the government subsidies, would Tesla be there? Would SpaceX exist if he hadn't got all of those government subsidies? There's a whole bunch of things that people are starting to question,
Well,
I
flip
think,
the
in terms
question.
of his unquestioned
But I mean,
success and
just
progress.
because the government, of course the government subsidizes space travel, like the government needs to send lots of things into space. So, but if you flip the question and say, would someone else have been doing SpaceX if the government subsidies existed, but Elon Musk did not?
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily would. I think he is the indispensable figure in all of this. The government money will come and government money will go. But there's only one person who has created like 3 world-changing companies.
Yeah, but I think that this was a little bit manipulative, is what they're saying, that it was almost like Elon Musk was negotiating with Elon Musk over this. Like,
That's because Elon Musk created everything.
yeah, but I don't mind going through billionaires, like going through Australia's rich list and going, too much.
Yeah.
You have
Well,
too
to
much.
that point, Jess, and I think this is the point. I'm a bit of a
Communist, socialist.
an absolutist
Terrorist.
when it comes to tearing down or very much robustly questioning billionaires. And especially off the back of, I think, out of Davos, the latest Oxfam report that they generally put out at the same time said that the 5 top billionaires doubled their wealth since 2020, while the bottom 5 billion, the rest of us pretty much, have gone massively backwards. And I think the concern...
Wait, is that
we-
true? We
Yeah,
haven't gone
yeah.
backwards.
5 billion people have. We're not in that 5 billion. We're in the top.
By what
3.25%.
measurement are they going backwards, though?
In terms of poverty, we're talking numbers, real numbers, not even percentages. So this is a world...
That's not true.
I'll dig it up for you.
That's not
I just
true.
wrote about it on my Substack the other week.
Did you?
Yeah, I got
Must be true then.
and
It's on Sarah Wilson's Substack.
It was in the news last week. It was everywhere.
Like hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty in the past 20 years.
Do we
you
want
know,
to go down that
in the
Steven
world.
Pinker, Bill Gates
Yeah,
discussion? You
yeah.
do right now?
Sure.
All right. Can I finish my point first, though? The first
Okay.
original one. So one of the concerns, and it's related, The concern I have, and I think this is the debate that we need to be having around this, is much broader. We're living in a world where the experts are saying that the mass civil unrest, which is just, simmering at the moment, so the polarisation, all of this kind of thing, can very much be we can point to larger and larger gaps in equality. That is the thing that's going to trigger, and it's also the thing that's going to exacerbate the kind of collapse, the decline, unrest that I think everybody is very concerned about at the moment.
The anger and the discontent that exists within workplaces, even that you've got a CEO that's earning 1,000 times, 600 times, whatever it is, more than their worker. And then there are all these stats that come out that it would take you 5 lifetimes to earn what your CEO earns in a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's getting larger and larger. And as someone, I didn't grow up, my family's not business people. I didn't grow up understanding it, but I look at CEOs and go, okay, but you're taking a risk, right? You're going to wear the risk. But then COVID happened and it wasn't the CEOs that went under. Like if you look at a lot of the statistics, it's like they actually stayed very well afloat. And so you go, are you actually wearing the risks here? And Elon Musk, I just think in this case, you go, there's an issue with the system. It's an astronomical, unfathomable amount of money for anyone to make. And I understand why they're doing it, because they're thinking Elon Musk's time is divided at the moment. Like he's got all these projects and they're going Tesla,
into Tesla.
But hang on, let me be the capitalist and also the anti-capitalist at the same time by saying, I think it's true that inequality is too high, and there are like official measures of this. The Gini coefficient, which measures like overall inequality, is getting to almost like Latin American levels in the United States and the UK.
And the global Gini coefficient is overall
right.
the most it's ever been.
I think you might be getting that confused with the poor people actually getting poorer, because everyone's getting richer. It's just that the rich are getting richer at a faster pace than the poor are getting richer.
Well, according to Oxfam, no, but you can put it in the show.
All those commies. They were probably part of the October 7th terrorist attacks as well at Oxfam.
Probably.
So the inequality is bad. Lots of people just, enjoy their privilege of going to private schools and going into finance and getting high-paid jobs, and they should be taxed more, and life should be easier for poor people and for the working poor. I don't see that as in any way part of the conversation about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a once-in-a-generation freak. Like he is a quasi-autistic, like asshole boy genius who, just because he's becoming a nasty, like bitter Twitter troll, does not detract from the fact
with a messiah complex.
Does not detract from the fact that he has revolutionized our approach to climate change by making electric cars cool. He's revolutionized, the automotive industry. He's revolutionized space travel. He is an extremely influential person. And I think if you're one of those people, if you're a Thomas Edison or a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk, you get to just say, I'm going to take $55 billion of the value that I have produced.
Yeah,
the value the $55 billion that would not exist, and much, much more.
He's been financially compensated. He's the richest man in the world already. He's worth $210 billion. It's like, to have this, clearly like the state is sort of going, this isn't sustainable. This doesn't make sense. Even when you look at the numbers, it didn't entirely make sense that he's written it in that he'll earn this amount and blah. Like they've clearly looked at it and gone, this isn't making sense.
Why can't he just keep all of it? Why stop at $55 billion? It's his. It wouldn't exist without him.
That, and I think there are broader discussions that we can have, and shareholders can go to the court. Was it the Supreme Court? Was it?
No, it was it was the Delaware court, because that's where his business is incorporated.
Yeah.
Delaware is, if you look at where almost all the big companies are incorporated in the United States, it's Delaware, because it's supposed to have very friendly, it's supposed to be a very pro-company state.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not so pro-company that it's willing to go along with it. And he tweeted out saying, I would advise anyone who's incorporating a company in the United States not to go to Delaware. But that's just sour grapes.
Yeah. Look, boo-hoo. I mean, maybe that's the best answer I can give, boo-hoo, in terms of Elon. But I think that I see it as signifying a great thing that people are actually pushing back against this rampant runaway wealth.
We're all suckling at the Elon teat, and someday that cow's going to dry up And you're going to be left with no more electric cars.
Well, while he's pissing off to Mars, right, the rest of us will be kind of, I don't know, going back to subsistence farming.
Saved by his attempts to battle
way.
climate change, I suppose. Look, the second story today is big Australian news, but it has ramifications for people all over the rest of the world as well, which is that these tax cuts, which the previous Conservative government had promised, which were due to be phased in over a period of stages, with the biggest tax cuts for the top end of town kicking in stage 3, which was due to drop next year. The Labor government, the centre-left government, which had just we don't need to see that video anymore if we're still on it. The centre-left government came into power before the election. They were like, don't worry, we're going to keep all of these tax cuts. If you're super wealthy and you're worried about us going full socialist on you, you're going to be able to keep all of your tax cuts. Now they've turned around and they've gotten rid of the stage 3 tax cuts anyway, which raises the question, should politicians do what they think is right, or should they do what they promised to do, Jessie?
I think they should do what they think is right. And I want a government that looks at the evidence, looks at the current climate, looks at the current issues that they're being presented with and pivots. Because I've looked closely at these and gone, yeah, they make sense. And I think it's something like 90% of us are going to be better off. So the coalition is clearly going to go down the line of liars, 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 because that's the best kind of political angle they've got. But I think it's going to be difficult to turn people on this when they look closely at what has actually been done. I
love your faith that people look closely at things.
They're just going to say liars, more money for you.
Yeah, you're like, when the average voter actually starts reading the 923-page document that the government has put out, they will then come around.
But I think, look, the Labor Party's in a good position because it is actually a good news story. So I think Julia Gillard, there's also John Howard that got hauled over the coals for going back on an election promise. Their pivot was to something that would put most Australians in a worse off position. So this one is a good news story.
What were their broken promises?
One was GST, and then what was Julia Gillard's one?
Wait, that wasn't a broken promise.
Carbon tax.
Yeah. GST wasn't a broken promise because he took it to Julia. Yeah, no, but hang on. John Howard didn't. Now I sound really conservative and capitalist. John Howard, who was Australia's second longest serving Prime Minister and a conservative icon, he didn't break a promise. He went to an election saying that if he wins the election,
there'd never be a GST.
No, so he had said there will never be a goods and services tax in Australia.
Yeah.
And then he said years later, let's do this. There should be a goods and services tax. But he said it before an election. He said, so vote us in and we'll do it. To me, that's different.
Yes.
Because then you're not lying. You are changing your mind about something, but you're not foisting it on the people after having been elected, saying you weren't going to do it. You're giving them an opportunity.
It was a non-core promise as well.
Yeah,
I remember that line as well.
Yeah,
but look, I mean, I think the thing is, I'm with Jess on this. I want a government that actually does adjust and is agile and moves with where they want to go. And circumstances have certainly changed. I think there's also, I'm sure you would have come across that work that was written a decade or so ago called On Bullshit by Henry Frankfurt, I think it is, an American philosopher. But he makes that distinction between lying and bullshitting.
There was a philosopher who literally wrote a book called On Bullshit.
Yeah,
Bullshit,
exactly.
Literally.
Took the title I'm sure we all would like to have on our own. But so lying is very different to bullshitting. Lying is something where you've got an awareness of the truth, and you're doing something that then does contravene. Bullshitting is showing a disregard for the truth. So I don't think in this case, Anthony Albanese went into the election thinking that, I don't really care whether I keep this promise or not. And I think this is where I think a lot.
Wait, so are you saying he was bullshitting or lying?
I think it's the type of lie that's not bullshit, if you know what I mean. A bullshit lie is the kind that I think many Australians really rile up against. Where
is that when they
weren't even seriously about this in the first place?
They feel manipulated,
yes.
sort of? Yeah. I don't think he did that. I think you're right. Yeah, I think that this is just an exceptional set of circumstances.
Wait, I'm
confused.
Cost of living. I don't think for a second that he thought that he was going to
keep the promise.
I think he knew that he was.
You think he did it just to get?
I think
Really?
I think everybody except extremely ideological conservatives and very rich people knew that the stage 3 tax cuts were a joke, giving that much money to the super rich. That like they were a way to smuggle in that the tax stage 1 and 2, which were the tax cuts for normal income earners, that those were a way of opening the door to the postponed tax cuts that were quite beyond the pale. And there's no way that Labor, the centre-left party, would have wanted to go along with that. And they probably knew that at some stage, if they could, and if the political circumstances were right, they would reverse that. But
how do you think it's going to fare for them? Like, because calling a politician a liar is like the oldest,
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, did I just turn Swedish? Yeah, das ist ein good question. I don't know whether or not people care about...
Dutton hasn't got a leg to stand on.
That's the opposition leader, the Conservative.
Yeah, sorry, for our American
We've got
friends.
a lot of American listeners here.
So he'll get shouty because that's all he does is get really, really shouty. And it's going to be there's going to be two stories to tell. If the Labor Party get it right, they don't try to explain stage 3 tax cuts to the Australian people. They just go, you're going to be better off, right?
Yeah.
Things change. We want to make sure you're not left out. We want everybody to move ahead.
And there are still some tax cuts, right? They're not abolishing all of them.
No.
They're just skewing it more towards the lower end of town.
Yeah, lower to middle income earners don't fare as badly, is I guess how you could say it. Dutton, however, all he can do is go lies, lies, lies. And I think we're a little bit sick of it. The flip side also is if he gets into power, how's he going to reverse that? So if I was the Labor Party and if I were a journalist, I'd be pinning him down to making a promise that he's not going to reverse it or he will reverse it.
In which case, that's very unpopular.
That's very unpopular. That's right. So
right, I see what you're saying.
He's
because if you were just going to bring in the stage 3 tax cuts as a standalone policy,
you're going to look
everyone
pretty
would
crook.
hate them.
Yeah.
They were only palatable because they were tied to more reasonable tax cuts for everybody in stage 1 and 2. We've already gotten those tax cuts. So to go into an election promising to bring in stage 3, would look pretty
unless
out of touch.
He can peg it to Labor is ruining a insert barbecue, weekend or something. There's something that
the private jet brigade.
That's
the,
it. The brigade.
PJ. And Jessie, to your question of like, will it damage? I mean, I've read a lot. Like my mate Peter Van Onselen was writing he's a political, analyst and economics writer. And he was writing in The Australian saying this is going to be hugely damaging to Anthony Albanese because they're not going to be able to make any promises before the next election that anyone will take seriously. So all of the boogeymen that the Conservative opposition party likes to scare people with about what will happen if the left retains control then become more plausible. Like they might get rid of negative gearing, which is this, property tax regime that we have in Australia that benefits the wealthy, or they might, I don't know, whatever it is. But and none of their insistences that they're not going to do those things will count as much as they would have had they stuck by the stage 3 tax cuts.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, and again, that depends on how much the average Australian pays attention to the news story. If they just
it just has to be repeatedly pointed out, though, doesn't it, by the opposition?
Yes.
They lied about this, so you can't trust them about that.
Yes, but I think that if it's clarified that if it depends on what the shorthand of stage 3 tax cuts ends up meaning. If it's synonymous with lie or if it's synonymous with better living standards or better, better situation for the average Australian. And it depends on who wins. And I think it's a
about
communication.
Storytelling. Yeah. And there's an opportunity here, I think, to actually tell quite a good story. I think, you're a father of 2 young kids. Like, you can explain to a child, all right, mummy and daddy said that they would never divorce. However, situations change. and this is what
have you been doing to my partner? What should I know?
But kids can follow that, right? I mean, life is full of adults, well-meaning adults, even if they're caught up in the politics of the time, making promises, and then things change and you have to explain
Why
to
don't
someone.
they not make
and a
the promise?
4-year-old.
Why don't they have the cojones to just go, you know what? It's a bad policy. We'll see how we go. Yeah, look,
I'd love that too.
I would like it. Albanese could have stood up there and said, personally, those tax cuts offend me. If it were up to me, I would never have conceived of that policy. At the moment, let's not worry about that. It's a couple of years
True.
down the track.
I agree.
Yeah.
I suppose then they would just say, they would run a whole scare campaign about how your taxes are going to go up under Labor
Exactly.
or, stay the same under Labor.
This is a topic that comes up constantly. American friends would be well aware of this in their own country. I mean, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And the polarisation and the screaming and yelling and shoutiness, it is exceedingly difficult. I agree that I think we are moving into an era where some really fair dinkum honesty and really good storytelling could actually shift things.
Yeah.
And Anthony Albanese could have done that pre-election, I agree, but it was so touch and go as to whether he would get in. And so, desperate times call for those horrible, futile, juvenile kind of statements. But yeah, now that he's in power, he's probably in a position where he can actually tell a good story around it that speaks to the maturity that we're all wanting to be treated with. We're all wanting to rise to a more mature way of going about things instead of being dragged back into this fragmentation and bifurcation, which it's horrible to observe. It really is horrible. It's the second kind of war that's going on. There's the other battles that are going out there in the world, in politics and the Middle East and so on. And then there's the fact that we're not handling things war,
Yeah.
And so maybe Jessie and I might be idealists here, but
I'm with you.
I'm with you.
I mean, and it comes back to the bullshit thing as well, because once people feel like there's no one to trust, the response can be this kind of nihilism towards truth at all.
Yeah.
And like the greatest avatar of the bullshit phenomenon is Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin,
truth?
where it's exactly. They don't lie in order to get you to believe the lie. They lie in order to corrode the idea that there's any truth at all, and that that anyone it's
create
almost,
chaos.
It's almost like he won by saying, "I'm going to lie to you, but I'll lie directly to your face, and you'll know that I'm lying." Instead of being a sneaky, sniveling Hillary Clinton type liar who's in bed with lobbyists and the Washington elite.
Code for also sitting around large conference rooms, committees, dealing with multitude of opinions and interest groups to come up with a decision that is invariably watered down and compromised. I mean, that's how politics works.
Yeah.
Trump sidesteps that.
Exactly, and then gets nothing done as a result. There's a new ad campaign in Australia against vaping. Big crackdowns on vaping in Australia. It's now illegal to buy or sell nicotine
First
vape.
country in the world, isn't
Unless you get... Is it?
it?
I felt like the New Zealanders or some other communists would have cracked authoritarians would have cracked down on that.
We're first when it comes to cigarette-y type things.
We're first. We are the nanny state. We are the ultimate nanny state.
This one I agree with, though, I've got to say.
If you're driving along Moore Park Road at 40 kilometres an hour with the speed cameras snapping at you and you're vaping with a nicotine vape, then do you go to jail forever or do you get beheaded if you get caught or what?
Great point.
I think we also need to give some context here as to what Moore Park Road is. It's a
it's a road where the speed limit is too slow. It's like an 8-lane freeway where the speed limit is literally 25 miles an hour or 40 kilometres an hour.
It's a bloody sport. Every now and then, it's a cricket game.
Every 3 months, it's right next to the stadium. Yeah. So once every 3 months, there are drunk...
And so it's a great revenue raiser.
...football fans staggering across the road. Make it 40 kilometres an hour once a month.
Well, there's police there at all times. Anyway, back to the vaping.
So it's illegal. So you need to go to your doctor and get a prescription now, and you're going to be able to go to the pharmacy and get a script for a nicotine vape if you're a smoker. Apart from that, not supposed to do anything. We've got these ad campaigns talking with young people about how surprisingly addictive vaping was and how they couldn't stop and everything. Is that okay? What about...
I think it has to be. I think it's like a desperate time calls for desperate measures. Like the fact my mates who are vaping were never cigarette smokers.
Why did they start doing it?
Because it doesn't stink.
Because they're idiots. It does stink. It all smells like blueberry.
Yes, but it doesn't have
like
that.
Bubble gum.
I think that what we did so incredibly well...
carcinogenic stink.
Yes, exactly right. And what we did so well in Australia was make it ugly. To be on the side of the street with a cigarette became synonymous with, it was almost a working class thing. It was almost...
I mean, it's worse than working class.
Yeah, the way it smells, the way it looks, it became so uncool Then what happened with the vapes is that they came in, they didn't stink. They were kind of cool because people would go, well, what's that? This is even just 5 years ago. And I've got mates who, again, would never pick up a cigarette, but you're sitting there having brunch with them and they can't sit at a table for 20 minutes because they've got to run over and start sucking on the vape. Or
they just do suck on the vape anywhere and everywhere.
Exactly
I mean, with the exception, with the possibility of an aeroplane, I've seen people vape everywhere. Yeah. Like everywhere.
Well,
office
the aeroplane
buildings.
thing, I was at the airport recently and I got pulled over by security. I was pregnant and my bump went off in the thing and I had to go and get pat down with the whole thing. Anyway.
Wait, your embryo went off?
Yes, it must have had some metal
fetus?
in there or something. And I got pulled into a room and the woman was a bit chatty because we were waiting and she said
You
yesterday.
got pulled into a room for
Yes, I had to
secondary?
be touched up.
Really?
Sounds like Iran.
Yes, that's right, exactly.
Well,
Were they gynecological implants?
To hear the rest of this conversation, go to uncomfortableconversations.substack.com/listen and you will get your own personal premium podcast feed with at least 3 extra episodes of the podcast every month and heaps of extra stuff, including the remainder right now of the fabulous conversation you've just been hearing. If it was worth listening to this much of, don't rob yourself of the rest. Pull out your phone right now and search for Uncomfortable Conversations on Substack.